I want you to picture a city for a second.
Okay.
It's this place where every single morning, millions of people wake up and just meticulously perform these ancient rituals.
Right, like clockwork.
Exactly. The temples and mosques are packed to the brim. The chants are perfectly memorized. I mean, everyone is reciting the exact same sacred verses, hoping or praying, really, for divine blessings to just fall from the sky.
Yeah, expecting a miracle.
Right. And yet when you walk out of those beautifully ornate buildings and step into the actual streets, the city is crumbling.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
There is, rampant poverty, systemic corruption, extreme wealth hoarding, like a justice system that literally only works for the highest bidder.
So a complete disconnect between the rituals and reality.
Exactly. So here is the deeply uncomfortable question we have to ask today. Why do we recite ancient verses simply hoping for, blessings, while completely and utterly failing to implement the socio-economic justice and the rational, equitable systems that those very words actually demand?
It is the great paradox of modern civilization, isn't it? I mean, we have taken what was originally designed to be a comprehensive, practical instruction manual for human society.
A literal blueprint.
Yes, a civilizational blueprint. And we've reduced it to a collection of magical incantations.
It's wild.
It really is. We treat the text as if the mere sound of the syllables vibrating in the air is supposed to, fix our potholes and feed our starving neighbors.
Yeah, like a magic spell. And that massive disconnect, that illusion, is exactly what we are going to systematically dismantle today. So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, our core mission is to shatter what we are going to call the ritual trap. Because honestly, there is a very high probability that you, listening to this right now, might have been treating a profound civilizational blueprint as a mere religious placeholder.
And we have a truly staggering stack of sources on the table today to prove this.
We really do. I do not use that word lightly. We are looking at comprehensive lecture notes and deeply researched translated exegesis focused on Surah Al-Imran from the Quran, specifically verses 59 through 63.
But it's important to note, we are looking at them through a very specific, highly analytical lens.
Right. The rationalist school of thought developed by Allama G. Parwez.
And we really need to set the table for what Parwez's framework is attempting to do here, because the sheer ambition of these sources is breathtaking.
It's completely paradigm shifting.
Yeah. Parwez is not trying to give you, a slightly tweaked version of the Sunday school lessons you grew up with. He is attempting to transition human thought entirely away from dogmatic, mythological religion.
The sources actually use a specific Arabic word for this traditional ritualistic religion, right?
Yes, the word is mazhab. The goal of the text is to pull the reader completely out of mazhab.
Out of the rituals and the magic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And move them into a rationally grounded, scientifically valid, socio-economic system of life. And the text refers to the system as deen.
Okay, so deen versus mazhab. It's not just a translation difference, it's like a categorical difference in how you view reality itself.
Completely different operating systems for the human mind.
That's a great way to put it. But before we get into the heavy mechanics of how that works, I need to pass on a very strict warning from the source material itself.
Ah, yes, the prerequisite.
Yeah, it's essentially a psychological prerequisite for this entire deep dive. The text commands the reader, and by extension you, the listener, to actively purge your subconscious mind of traditional dogmas before proceeding.
Which is incredibly difficult to do.
It is. The author describes these inherited beliefs, the stories you were told as a child, as literal idols residing in the mind.
Mental idols.
Right. And the warning is stark. If your mind is cluttered with preconceived notions, magical thinking, fabricated traditions, the objective truth of what we are about to discuss simply cannot be grasped.
It's a profound ask, because cognitive dissonance is a very real, very painful psychological phenomenon.
Oh, absolutely.
When we hear something that directly contradicts a deeply held belief, especially a belief tied to our identity or our community, our brains often perceive it as a physical threat.
We put up walls instantly.
We do. But according to Parwez's framework, you cannot build a rational society, a deen on top of an irrational foundation.
You can't mix the two.
No. You cannot hold on to the comfort of a magical worldview while simultaneously trying to grasp a scientifically rigorous sociological blueprint. You have to approach this with an entirely clean intellectual slate.
Which, like you said, is incredibly hard to do. I'll admit it right now, as I was reading through these sources, I felt that resistance.
The natural reaction.
Yeah. I kept thinking, but wait, what about the miracles? What about the stories I've known my whole life? But if we are going to do this deep dive justice, we have to try. We have to wipe the slate clean.
Absolutely.
So let's start at the absolute beginning, because once you wipe away the myths, the very first thing the text addresses is the origin of humanity itself.
The creation story.
Exactly. Now, traditionally, when we think about the religious origin of life, it almost always starts with a magical creation myth.
Right. A deity takes some mud, sculpts a physical, lifeless clay statue of a man.
And then snaps their fingers or breathes into it, and boom, instant human.
That is the quintessential mazhab narrative. It's instantaneous, it's magical, and it completely bypasses the laws of physics and biology.
Exactly. But here is where the sources just pull the rug out from under that narrative. They take a strict, incredibly deep linguistic dive into the Arabic words used in the Quran, specifically the word turab.
Yes, Turab.
And the way Parwez breaks down the etymology of this word completely flips the script on the whole clay statue story.
This is where the lexicographical approach becomes absolutely crucial. You have to understand how classical Arabic roots actually function.
Right, because translations can be biased.
Huge biases. Traditionally, in a lot of popular translations, Turab is simply rendered as literal dust or mud.
Which fits the statue narrative perfectly.
Exactly. If you already have the idol of the clay statue in your mind, translating Turab as mud perfectly reinforces your existing bias. You think, ah, yes, the sculptor's clay.
But Parwez goes back to the absolute foundational root meanings.
He does. In his framework, Turab does not mean mud in the context of pottery. It fundamentally represents non-living inorganic matter.
Oh, wow. So it is the base elemental state of the earth before biological life exists.
Precisely. It's not a reference to an artisan's medium. It's a chemical designation.
That is wild. It marks the absolute fundamental starting point of a biological evolutionary chain.
Yes, according to this rationalist Quranic framework, the origin of life did not begin with a sudden, instantaneous, magical creation of a fully formed bipedal mammal.
No magic snap of the fingers.
No. Instead, the texts point to a process where fundamental cells combined within this earthly, heated inorganic matter.
And the text specifically mentions the application of heat to this inorganic matter, right? Which eventually generated the very first germ of life.
The text calls this the nafsi wahida.
Nafsi wahida. And here's another massive paradigm shift. Because traditionally, if you ask someone what nafsi wahida means, they will tell you it refers to a literal single male soul.
Adam.
Right, Adam. And from this single male soul, a female was magically extracted, usually from his rib.
The Riv story, yes.
But the sources ask us to look at the Arabic through the lens of modern biology, not ancient mythology.
Let's trace the mechanics of that biological analogy. If you look at the dawn of life on Earth through a scientific lens, you don't start with a fully formed human missing a rib.
Obviously not.
You start with a primordial single cell. According to the exegesis, nafsi wahida refers directly to this first unicellular organism.
It is the initial spark of life that emerged from that heated inorganic matter, the turab.
Exactly. And here is the critical mechanistic detail. At this initial stage of life, there was absolutely no biological distinction between male and female. The organism was genderless.
Right. It's just a single, self-contained unit of life.
Then, driven by the inherent programmed drive of evolutionary growth, this singular cell divided. It split into two parts.
Like cellular division.
Exactly. In modern biology, we literally call these daughter cells or sister cells. One path eventually developed into the male biological function, the other into the female.
So this cellular division is what initiated the entire vast biological chain of sexual reproduction.
Yes. Parwez is arguing that the text isn't describing a magic trick with a rib bone. It is describing a step-by-step, scientifically valid progression from inorganic elements to a unicellular organism to gendered biological reproduction.
I mean, it is genuinely mind-blowing to read a text that is centuries old through the lens of cellular biology.
It changes everything.
But I have to push back here on behalf of the listener, because if you know the text, there is a very famous, very specific phrase that seems to completely contradict this slow evolutionary idea.
I think I know the one you mean.
The phrase is kun fa-yakoon. It is universally translated as D, and it is.
Right.
Now, come on. Doesn't that phrase inherently, by its very definition, imply an instant magic wand? A deity says be, and in a millisecond, the universe appears. How does Parwez get around that?
It's a brilliant question, and it is exactly the kind of pushback the author anticipates. The traditional assumption, the mazhab mindset, reads be, and it is as a magician's spell.
Yeah, instant manifestation.
But Parwez's linguistic reality tears that assumption apart by looking at the actual grammar and mechanism of the Arabic phrasing. Kun Fayakun is not a past tense, instantaneous command. It is not be, and it was.
Okay, so what is the actual grammatical mechanism at play here?
Linguistically, it signifies a continuous, ongoing, and highly structured evolutionary process. It operates within what the text calls the realm of emarir, or divine command.
Yeah.
Yes. When the divine says kun, which means be, it is initiating a scheme at its lowest, most foundational state, like that inorganic turab.
Okay, and the Fayakun part?
Fayakun actually translates closer to, and it is becoming. It represents the progressive, step-by-step development upwards.
Oh, wow, so it's not finished instantly.
Not at all. It is the setting into motion of an unbreakable algorithm of natural laws. The command is the initiation of the law. The result is the evolutionary process playing out according to that law.
And the scale of this process, the timeline, is what really caught my attention in the notes. The sources explicitly state that a single stage, a single quote-unquote day in this continuous progressive development can take thousands or even 50,000 human years to complete.
Yes. We are not talking about a 24-hour period. We are talking about geological time, evolutionary epochs.
That is massive. The universe and biological life are consistently, relentlessly evolving.
The divine order in this framework is characterized by systematic development, not abrupt, uncaused magical events.
Then why does this matter so much?
Because by establishing this massive evolutionary baseline, where complex life systematically originates from fundamental physical elements over vast stretches of time according to fixed rules, the text proves that the universe is governed by rational, predictable laws.
Right. If the universe is a machine built on reliable laws, you can actually study it. You can build a civilization on it.
Exactly.
If it's just a magician pulling rabbits out of hats whenever he feels like it, nothing is predictable.
Precisely. And establishing this unbreakable rule of law is absolutely vital because it sets the stage for what is arguably the most controversial application of this logic in the entire surah.
Oh, yeah. This is where the cognitive dissonance is going to hit a fever pitch, because we have to transition from how microscopic life began to how specific, highly revered human beings were born.
Yes.
This brings us to the eradication of biological exceptionalism, specifically looking at the case of Jesus or Isa in Arabic and Adam.
This is a huge turning point in the text.
Because if Parwez's framework is correct, and you establish that the universe runs on these unbreakable evolutionary laws of reproduction, you can't just suddenly throw in a massive biological exception when it's narratively convenient.
You cannot. The logic must remain consistent.
So let's look at the actual text of Surah Al-Imran, verse 59. The verse states, quote, "Indeed, the example of Jesus to Allah is like that of Adam."
Right.
Now, if I'm a traditionalist, I read that and think, okay, Adam was made miraculously from dirt without a father or mother. Jesus was made miraculously in a virgin's womb without a father. The likeness is that they are both magical biological exceptions.
That is the standard mazhab interpretation.
How does the rationalist school completely invert that?
It all comes back to the linguistic definition of Adam. This verse is the absolute cornerstone for dismantling the dogma of biological exceptionalism.
Okay, break that down for us.
As we established, the traditionalist reads Adam and pictures the first sculpted clay man. But our sources explain that in the precise Quranic lexicon, Adam is synonymous with Admi.
Admi, which means?
It means mankind, the collective human species.
Wait, really?
Yes, it's not a single historical individual named Adam who lived in a literal garden. It is a categorical term for the entirety of human evolutionary history.
Hold on, let me make sure I am grasping the magnitude of this.
Go ahead.
If Adam represents the collective human species, and we just spent the last segment proving that humanity evolved through natural biological laws that eventually and strictly required both a male and a female for reproduction,
Yes.
then the verse saying the likeness of Jesus is identical to Adam means something entirely different.
What does it mean?
It means his likeness is identical to the rest of mankind, which means Jesus was subject to the exact same universal biological laws as every other human being.
Exactly.
Parwez is saying Jesus was born of both a mother and a father.
That is exactly what the framework argues. This is where the text directly challenges the reader's most deeply held inherited assumptions.
I mean, that is huge.
According to Parvez, to claim that Jesus was born of a virgin without a human father makes the Quranic comparison to the rest of humanity, to Adam, logically flawed.
Because if he was a biological exception, his likeness is not like that of the rest of humanity.
Right, it would be entirely different. The rationalist interpretation insists that the divine system does not and will not break its own established biological laws.
So prophets are just human beings.
Yes, they eat, they sleep, they bleed, and they are bound by the exact same physical and biological realities as everyone else.
Okay, I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second.
Please do.
Because if you are listening to this, there's a very good chance you are feeling a knot in your stomach right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We are casually dismantling the virgin birth, a concept that 2,000 years of theology across multiple major world religions is built upon.
It's a massive shift.
You are asking people to give up what they view as the ultimate proof of divine power. I mean, aren't miracles, these massive biological exceptions, the whole point of religion?
That's the traditional view, yeah.
Doesn't taking away the virgin birth or the magic staff or the parting of the sea somehow diminish the greatness of a prophet? If a prophet is just a regular biological guy, why should anyone listen to him?
That visceral reaction, that fear of losing the magic, is exactly what the text addresses through the concept of gulo.
Gulo. What does that mean?
Gulo translates to exaggeration, or the creation of personality cults.
Oh, interesting.
The traditional religious mindset, the mazhab mindset, operates on a very specific, somewhat childish logic. It believes that ultimate power and greatness can only be proven by breaking the rules.
Right, like if a king wants to show he is powerful, he breaks the law to show he is above it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we project that onto the divine. We think God proves his greatness by breaking the laws of nature.
Look what I can do. I can make a woman pregnant without a man. I can make fire not burn.
But Parwez argues this is a severe logical and theological flaw. Attributing supernatural biological traits to human beings inevitably, historically, elevates them to a status of divinity.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If a man has no human father, the human mind, leaning into gulo, will inevitably elevate him to being the literal son of God. We have seen this happen.
Right, that's exactly what happened historically.
But the foundational premise of the Quran is that sovereignty, divine attributes, and the power of creation belong exclusively to the divine. You cannot share those attributes with a human without destroying the entire theological framework.
So the source is basically arguing that God's greatness isn't shown by breaking the laws of the universe, but by the fact that the laws are so perfect they never actually need to be broken.
Exactly. The mechanism of divine greatness is absolute consistency. It is reliability.
Okay, but then what is human greatness?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, if human exceptionalism isn't about magical, supernatural, biological exemptions, what is it? Because prophets clearly did incredible things.
The text argues that true human exceptionalism is found in reaching the stage of Bashariyat.
Bashariyat, let's unpack that.
In this evolutionary framework, humanity evolved biologically like other animals, but we eventually crossed a threshold.
A psychological threshold.
Yes. Bashariyat is the evolutionary stage where humanity attained personality, self, and crucially, free will.
Free will.
The Arabic term is quwwat iradi. That is our actual superpower. Our greatness does not lie in bending the laws of physics or having supernatural biology.
Right.
Our greatness lies in our conscious choice to align our free will with the divine system within those natural laws.
So a prophet is exceptional not because of his biology, but because of his unbreakable psychological and intellectual commitment to truth.
Beautifully said. Yes.
I really like that framing. It shifts the burden of greatness from magic to character and intellect.
It makes it attainable, in a way.
It does. But this naturally brings up a fascinating and deeply necessary follow-up question, and it's a question of sociology.
Okay, let's hear it.
Historically, religious factions relied heavily on claims of the supernatural to prove their supremacy. You know, my God is stronger than your God because my prophet did a bigger miracle.
Right, the miracle arms race.
Exactly. So if we're stripping away the miracles, the magic, the supernatural interventions, and the dogmas, how do you resolve disputes?
That is the core issue.
Yeah. If you and I have a massive theological or societal disagreement, and neither of us can call down a lightning bolt to prove we are right, how do we actually prove the truth?
That is the pivotal question of civilization. Because when you lack a rational method for proving truth, things get very dark very quickly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And to illustrate this, the sources delve into the historical background of Surah Al-Imran, verse 61, detailing the traditional practice of Mubahala.
Oh, yes. The history here is wild. I want you to imagine this scenario. You have two opposing religious factions, let's say a group of early Muslims and a group of rival theologians.
Okay.
They are locked in a bitter dispute over the nature of God. Neither side will concede to the other's logical arguments. So what is the traditional mazhab solution?
It's not a debate, I'll tell you that.
No. They declare a Mubahala, they gather all their people, the men, the women, the children, they stand in an open field facing each other and they proceed to hurl vehement, horrific verbal curses at one another.
It's intense.
They scream at the sky, literally begging for divine wrath, for lightning or disease, to magically strike down and kill the liar.
It is essentially a cursing match, masquerading as justice.
It's insane.
It's deeply superstitious, it's psychologically abusive, and it relies entirely on the expectation of a supernatural magical intervention to settle a debate.
And Parwez's rational analysis of this verse vehemently, absolutely rejects this traditional interpretation.
Completely rejects it.
The sources argue that it is a profound insult to the dignity of a prophet, a man sent as a mercy to mankind, a man of intellect and bashariyat, to suggest he would gather his family to engage in a screaming match of curses with his political rivals.
It completely contradicts the entire rational framework we just established.
Right.
The confusion, once again, stems from a severe misunderstanding of the linguistic root of the Arabic words used in the verse. The traditionalists read the word nabtahil, and because they already believe in magic and curses, they translate it as, let us curse each other.
But Parwez looks at the root word, which is Baal, and the linguistic journey of the word Baal is beautifully practical. Let's talk about how the ancient Arabs actually used this word.
It's very grounded in their reality.
It originally referred to a camel. Specifically, it meant to leave a camel untethered. You remove its reins, you take off the halter, and you allow the animal the absolute freedom to choose its own path in the desert.
Now think about how that mechanism translates into a societal concept.
Yeah.
How do you go from untethering a camel to resolving a theological dispute?
It's a metaphor for freedom and separation. It doesn't mean cursing. It means peacefully letting go.
Precisely. In the context of a severe, intractable dispute where neither side will accept the other's logical arguments, ibtihal, the correct systemic understanding of the term, means a peaceful, dignified mutual disengagement.
A mutual disengagement.
Yes. The Quranic term for this is hajj jamil, a graceful distancing. The Prophet wasn't saying, let's curse each other until God kills you. He was saying, you take your community and I will take mine. Let us untether from one another. Let us leave each other alone to freely implement our respective systems without violence or interference.
I absolutely love this. It's essentially the ultimate libertarian sociological experiment.
Exactly.
Okay, we fundamentally disagree on how society should be run. Instead of going to war, instead of screaming at each other, let's both go build our own societies based on our own rules. You run your economy your way, I'll run mine my way, and let's see what happens.
Which leads us directly to what the text calls the ultimate scientific method for civilization.
And what is that?
The sources call it the pragmatic test, or Nataish ka sabut, the proof of outcomes.
This is where Parwez's framework truly shines as a sociological blueprint. The Prophet's stance wasn't to argue theology until he was blue in the face.
No.
His stance was deeply practical. He basically said, work according to your system or program, and I will work according to mine. The truth is not determined by who has the most eloquent arguments or the loudest curses.
Right. The truth is determined by the results.
And this pragmatic test completely redefines another massive concept in traditional religion, the concept of lanat, or a curse.
This is a crucial redefinition.
Because in the mythological mazhab paradigm, a curse is a magical hex. A witch or a prophet curses you and you suddenly get sick, or your crops die as a magical blight.
But in the rationalist Quranic lexicon, lanat has no magical properties whatsoever. It is a strictly systemic outcome.
So what does it actually mean?
Lanat simply means being systematically deprived of the pleasantries, the peace, and the positive outcomes of life. It is the natural, unavoidable consequence of a flawed socioeconomic system.
Let's ground this in reality. Give me an example of how the systemic lanat works.
Okay, if you build a society on injustice, say a system where a tiny elite hoards all the wealth while the working class starves, or a system built on racial discrimination, or a system that suppresses scientific inquiry.
Right.
Your people will inevitably suffer. Crime will rise, public health will collapse, innovation will stagnate, the society will be deprived of peace and prosperity.
And that deprivation,
That systemic misery is the curse. It is the real-world proof that your underlying system is fundamentally false.
And the brilliant part is, you don't have to wait until you die to see who won the argument.
Exactly.
This is a massive departure from traditional religion. The text highlights a specific linguistic marker used in the Quran, fasafa talamun, which translates to, soon you will know.
So you will know.
Traditional religion, mazhab, defers the proof of truth entirely to the afterlife. It's like, sure, we are poor and oppressed and miserable now, but just wait until we die. We'll get mansions in heaven and you'll go to hell.
It's the ultimate cop-out because it can't be proven.
Exactly. It requires zero accountability in the present moment. But Parwez's pragmatic test demands real-world, present-day proof.
The practical, tangible socioeconomic outcomes of a society, what the text calls akibat ud-durar, the ultimate outcome of the abode, will undeniably prove which system flourishes and which fails.
If we connect this back to our opening scenario of the crumbling city, it fundamentally shifts the entire definition of what truth is.
It really does.
In this framework, absolute truth is not a theoretical, philosophical abstraction. It is not a feeling in your heart. Truth is inherently measurably constructive.
Yes.
If a system of beliefs is true, it must naturally and inevitably lead to societal prosperity, economic equity, physical security, and human dignity in the present physical world.
That is the test.
If a society is miserable, if it is corrupt, if its people are starving, its underlying system is false, period. Regardless of how many temples they build or how loudly its followers claim to have the theological high ground.
Which brings us to a critical pivot point in our deep dive.
Oh, okay.
If truth is strictly measured by real-world flourishing and physical prosperity, then what we traditionally call religion actually has to function as a highly effective socio-economic engine.
Right. It can't just be about personal rituals. It has to be about collective resource management.
Exactly. And this is exactly what the prompt for this deep dive asked us to explore. We need to move away from these religious definitions and look at the systemic definitions.
Let's look at two of the most famous religious terms, sabar and salat.
Okay, perfect examples.
Traditionally, sabar means patience, like sitting quietly and enduring suffering without complaining. And salat means the ritual physical prayer performed 5 times a day.
That's the mazhab view.
So how does the systemic deen framework redefine these?
In Parwez's framework, you have to look at them as components of a civilization. Sabar does not mean passive endurance of oppression.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. It means steadfastness, resilience, and unyielding perseverance in establishing the divine system, even when facing massive political or economic opposition. It's the grit required to build a nation.
That is so much more empowering. And salat.
Salat is not merely the physical act of bowing. The root meaning connects to following a leader or adhering closely to a path. In the systemic framework, salat is the establishment of and strict adherence to the divine socioeconomic roadmap.
Oh, wow.
It is the collective societal commitment to the system.
So, if salat is following the economic roadmap, what does that roadmap actually look like? What is the engine of this deen?
The sources dedicate a significant amount of space to a concept called nizam-e-rubiyat.
Nizam-e-rubiyat.
Yes, it translates to the system of providence or the system of nourishment. This is the actual mechanical economic engine of the Quranic framework.
Let's dig into that.
In a mazhab, economics is an afterthought. You give a little charity to feel good about yourself, but the core focus is on saving your soul. In the deen, economics is the absolute core.
Let's use a mechanistic metaphor to explain this, because I want to get away from abstract theology. Let's compare a society to a complex computer network.
I like this.
The Nizam-e-Rububiyat isn't just the terms and conditions you blindly scroll past. It is the core operating system, the foundational algorithm that dictates how every single resource, every byte of data is allocated across the network.
That's an excellent analogy. The goal of this operating system, the Nizam-e-Rububiyat, is the systematic, equitable distribution of resources.
So no one gets left behind.
Yes, exactly. Its primary directive is that the baseline physiological and developmental needs of every single node on the network, every human being, must be met. We are talking about food, shelter, healthcare, education.
Right.
A true system builds a prosperous society where no one is left behind to starve, while others hoard massive amounts of wealth.
The sources are incredibly harsh on wealth hoarding, aren't they?
Absolutely uncompromising. Because hoarding wealth in a few hands clogs the economic engine. It deprives the rest of the society, creating that lanat, that systemic curse of deprivation we talked about earlier.
It all connects back.
The system of providence ensures that surplus wealth continuously flows back into the society to nourish those who need it, allowing every individual to focus on higher human development rather than just fighting for base survival.
Okay, but an algorithm needs hardware to run on. It needs administrators. How is this managed in the real world?
That's where the state comes in.
Right. Scaling a system of complete economic equity from a small group of idealists to an entire civilization requires massive infrastructure. The sources point to the Markaz-i-Millat.
The Markaz-i-Millat is the central authority or the state apparatus. But the text is very clear on the nature of this authority. It cannot be a theocracy built on emotional superstition, blind faith, or the personality cult of a holy man.
So no infallible popes or divine right of kings.
Exactly. The Markaz must be built entirely on intellect, logical proof, which the Quran calls dalil, and scientific reality.
Dalil.
Yes, its sole exclusive job is the implementation and administration of the Nizam-e-Rububiyat. It is an administrative body tasked with running the economic engine efficiently.
And historically, this actually worked, didn't it? The sources point out that the ultimate proof that the Prophet Muhammad's system was a true deen wasn't a list of supernatural miracles he supposedly performed.
No, it wasn't miracles.
The pragmatic test was the historical revolution he actually brought about.
Exactly. Look at the historical data. He took a deeply oppressed, fractured, tribal society living in a harsh desert environment. And by implementing this exact economic engine, this Nizam-e-Rububiyat, he built them into a civilized force.
It's incredible when you view it practically.
This society possessed such immense economic equity, social cohesion, and intellectual vitality that it rapidly outlasted both the Roman and Persian empires.
They didn't win because they had better magic.
No, they won because they had a vastly superior, highly functional socio-economic system that actually nourished its citizens.
This is such a radical, ground-up departure from how most people view religious texts. We are talking about taxation, resource allocation, state infrastructure, and measurable societal outcomes.
It changes everything.
But this naturally raises a much darker question. We've talked about how a true system flourishes, but what are the exact scientific mechanics behind a false system's collapse?
The other side is coin.
Yeah. What causes the burn rate of a society to spiral out of control? If a society is failing the pragmatic test, what is the root cause?
To understand the mechanics of societal collapse, we have to reevaluate one more major religious concept: divine wrath.
Ah, yes. The classic lightning bolt from the sky.
Right. In the mythological Mazhab paradigm, if a society disobeys, the deity gets emotionally angry, throws a temper tantrum, and sends a flood or an earthquake to destroy them. It's arbitrary punishment.
But the rationalist framework of the Deen introduces what it calls the law of requital.
The law of requital, let's break that down.
Okay.
This is essentially the strict physics of social conduct. Divine wrath is not an emotional outburst from the heavens. It is the unavoidable, scientific, cause-and-effect consequence of a society's collective actions.
It's social physics. Like, if you touch a hot stove, you get burned. The stove isn't angry at you. The burn is just the physical consequence of your action.
Exactly.
Similarly, if you build a society on oppression, wealth hoarding, and injustice, it will inevitably collapse under its own weight.
But the text does something incredibly profound here. It traces the absolute root cause of this collapse, the genesis of what the Quran calls fasad, or systemic corruption.
Fasad.
Yes. Surah Al-Imran, verse 63, states that if people turn away from rational proof and insist on mythological beliefs, they become mufsideen, the creators of corruption.
So corruption doesn't start with someone stealing money from the treasury. Where does it start?
According to this psychological insight, fasad does not begin in the streets, and it doesn't even begin in the bank. It begins in the human intellect.
Let's go back to our computer OS metaphor.
Yeah.
How does the intellect get corrupted?
Think of the human mind as inherently designed, programmed by evolution to demand logical reasoning, evidence, and consistency. That is its natural operating system.
Right.
Now, what happens when you take this rational mind and you force it, through intense religious indoctrination or societal pressure, to accept deeply illogical dogmas?
Okay.
What happens when you force a human to believe that 2 + 2 = 5, or that a man can be born without a father, or that a clay statue can magically come to life?
You create severe, agonizing cognitive dissonance. You are essentially coding a fundamental contradiction directly into the base operating system.
Precisely. You are forcing the mind to break its own natural laws of logic. You are institutionalizing intellectual chaos.
And if the base operating system is corrupted, every single application that runs on it is going to glitch.
Yes. If a society trains its citizens to abandon logic and evidence regarding their deepest, most fundamental beliefs about the universe, how can you possibly expect those same citizens to use rigorous logic and evidence when managing the economy?
You can't.
Or when designing a justice system? You can't.
The sources actually provide a glaring, massive historical example of this exact phenomenon. The Dark Ages of Europe.
A perfect example.
You had an entire sprawling civilization where the central religious authority of the church demanded absolute, unquestioning belief in highly irrational dogmas.
Yeah.
And what was the result?
Look at the tangible results, the pragmatic test of that era. If your mind demanded logic, if you looked at a telescope and said, wait, the Earth revolves around the sun, like Galileo,
Or were persecuted.
you were persecuted. The intellect was completely, violently suppressed in favor of superstition.
And that intellectual corruption could not be contained to theology. It inevitably spilled over into the broader society. Forced irrationality breeds intense intolerance.
Because if you cannot rely on logic and evidence to convince someone you are right, what is your only remaining tool?
Violence, force.
Exactly. It leads directly to sectarian violence. It leads to the Inquisition.
It leads to the complete stagnation of scientific and medical knowledge, massive economic decay, feudal oppression, and ultimately the utter destruction and misery of the civilization.
The society tears itself apart from the inside, all because it forced a contradiction into the intellectual operating system.
This is the core thesis of Parwez's reading of Surah Al-Imran. If you can convince people to abandon logic regarding their faith, you can convince them to accept any injustice, any economic oppression, any cruelty in the real world.
A society's survival is inextricably, permanently tied to both its economic justice, nizami rububiyat, and its intellectual rationality dalil.
You cannot have one without the other.
If the foundation is intellectual rot, the economic and social superstructure will inevitably collapse into facade.
Which brings us right back full circle to the very beginning of this deep dive. It explains exactly why the text issued that strict warning to purge the idols of inherited beliefs from your mind.
It wasn't just a theological exercise.
It is a matter of civilizational survival. To build the deen, to build a society that actually flourishes, you must first liberate the human mind from the cognitive dissonance of mazhab.
You must align human thought with the rigorous scientific laws of nature and objective reality.
Only then, only when the operating system is clean can you build a socio-economic system that provides true, lasting justice and equity.
It is a massive, incredibly heavy paradigm shift.
It really is. Let's take a breath and synthesize what we have covered today, because we have traveled a vast conceptual distance.
You really have.
Over the course of this deep dive, we have methodically dismantled the mythological worldview. We have moved out of a universe populated by instantaneous magical clay statues, biological exceptions, and superstitious cursing matches.
And we have stepped into a mathematically precise, scientifically valid, evolutionary universe.
A universe governed by unbroken biological causality, rational conviction, and the absolute, unyielding necessity of socio-economic justice. We've realized that the Quranic text isn't asking us to blindly recite syllables to earn magic points for the afterlife.
Not at all.
It's handing us an extremely complex, highly rational blueprint for building a thriving, equitable civilization right here, right now.
And that synthesis leads us with a highly provocative and perhaps deeply uncomfortable final thought.
Oh, lay it on us.
We have spent this time establishing the law of tangible outcomes, the pragmatic test. We know, according to this framework, that a true system always, undeniably leads to societal prosperity, economic justice, and human dignity in the present world.
Right.
So I invite you to apply this rigorous scientific test to our current global landscape.
Oh, this is going to hurt.
If we look at the widespread economic disparity, the crushing poverty, the social decay, and the intellectual stagnation of the modern world,
Yeah.
what does that reveal about the systems we so fiercely and blindly defend today?
That is heavy.
Regardless of what labels we put on our societies, whether we call them capitalist, socialist, democratic, or even Islamic, are we, right now, suffering from the very facade, the systemic corruption and cognitive dissonance that this ancient text explicitly warned us about?
That is a remarkably heavy question to sit with, because if you look out your window or look at the news and you see mass deprivation, corruption, and systemic injustice, then according to the pragmatic test, our current systems are failing.
The underlying logic is false.
Which leads us to the ultimate next step question, the cliffhanger that we are going to have to explore in our future deep dives.
What is the question?
If we know definitively that a true deen requires a completely rational, highly equitable economic engine and nizami rubiyat to survive and flourish, how exactly does a modern society transition its massive, complex, deeply entrenched, and highly corrupt global economy to match these natural laws without the whole thing collapsing into chaos entirely?
That is the ultimate puzzle.
We know what the blueprint looks like, but how do we actually build that markazi malat, that rational central authority, in the 21st century?
Something to think about.
That is something for you to seriously mull over. Keep questioning your assumptions. Keep demanding logical proof. And whatever you do, do not settle for the ritual trap. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.